We are in a series entitled Without a King. And we're looking through the book of Judges and seeing what happens to a society when everyone feels that they can do whatever they want. We're going to look at Gideon. Let's turn to chapter 8, verses 22 through 35. It reads as this. It says, "Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, 'Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson, also you, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian.' Gideon said to them, 'I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you.' And Gideon said to them, 'Let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil.' For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites." In verse 25 it says, "And they answered, 'We will willingly give them.' And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in it the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. Besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels." Verse 27 says, "And Gideon made an ephod of it and put it in his city, in Ophrah," not Oprah, but Ophrah. "And all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. So Midian was subdued before the people of Israel, and they raised their heads no more, and they had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon. Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and lived in his own house. Now Gideon had 70 sons." That's a lot of sons. "His own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine who was in Shechem also bore him a son. And he called his name Abimelech. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash, his father, at Ophrah of the Abiezrites. As soon as Gideon died, the people of Israel turned again and whored after the Baals, or Baals, some would pronounce it, but it's literally actually Baals, and made Baal Berith their god." In verse 34 it says, "And the people of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hand of all their enemies on every side. And they did not show steadfast love," that chesed love, "to the family of Jerubbaal," that is Gideon, in return for all the good that he had done to Israel." Now, this is a very, very familiar story. Very familiar story. Many of you may have read it many times. Many of you may have rooted and shouted in joy for Gideon and his army and so forth. Many of you probably even equated that with the movie 300. I don't know. But the thing is that it is a very familiar story. But what I want us to do today, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I want us to get some good context from what we're going to talk about in chapter 8. And so I'm going to read this story, but I want to add some stuff, not add to the word, but I want to add some stuff as far as help us understand some things within the text. Is that okay with y'all? All right, so let's look at chapter 6. Chapter 6. It starts out, it says, "The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord." Now, mind you, you have this, Deborah died, and so forth. And every time a judge died, they go right back. Israel goes right back into their what? Sin, their own evil, their own sin. And so they did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Midian for 7 years. 7 years. And the hand of Midian overpowered Israel, and because of Midian, the people of Israel made for themselves the dens that are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. So they were afraid because Midian have made their lives, the Israelites, miserable. In verse 3 it says, for whenever the Israelites planted crops, the Midianites and the Amalekites and the people of the east would come up against them. See, now at this time you had these the 12 tribes. They were dispersed throughout and so forth, and they would go in and they would take and go through each tribe and ransacking their villages and things of that nature. In verse 4 it says they would encamp against them and devour the produce of the land as far as Gaza. So they would go far south to Gaza and leave no sustenance in Israel and no sheep or oxen or donkey. So they would go there, and again, they would rampage the place. Verse 5, it says, for they would come up with their livestock and their tents, and they would come like locusts in number. Both they and their camels could not be counted. That's a lot. So that they laid waste the land as they came in. And it says, and Israel was brought very low, weak, impoverished, poor, because of Midian. And the people of Israel cried out for help to the Lord. Are y'all still with me? When the people of Israel cried out to the Lord on account of the Midianites, the Lord sent a prophet. So the Lord sent a prophet. They were crying out. So what the Lord does, he sends a prophet to the people of Israel. Some of your translations may have the sons of Israel. And he said to them, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I led you up from Egypt and brought you out of the house of slavery. And I delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of all who oppressed you, and drove them out before you and gave you their land. And in verse 10 it says, and I said to you, I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. You shall not fear the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But he says this, but you have not obeyed my voice. And that's it. He's gone. It's like mic drop. They cried out to him. God sends a prophet, and the prophet says this, it's your fault. It's your fault. How many times God takes us out of something and we want to go right back into it? Delivers us. Takes us out. And we want to go right back into it. But again, God is gracious. You see, this prophet comes, he says what he says to the people, and he just leaves. That's it. But then watch this, verse 11. It says, now the angel of the Lord, somebody different, the angel of the Lord came and sat under the terebinth at Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, while his son Gideon, it's interesting, Gideon's name in Hebrew, his Hebrew name means hacker in English. Hacker, like you're hacking something. Watch this. While his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Now, this is not normal. You know, this is not normal, because in the ancient times, what they would do when they're beating the wheat out, a lot of times they would have oxen that would trample over, they get all the wheat. They have oxen that would trample over the wheat, kind of separate all that stuff and whatnot. And they get I would say like a pitchfork, if you will, something that will get it, and they would throw it up and so forth, and the wind would blow and separate the chaff from the wheat. But Gideon is in a wine press. This is something that's circular. Some of y'all seen The Chosen. You've seen the I don't know, season 2 or 1 or whatever, when they Peter, so to say, was stepping and his wife was stepping in this wine press, but it was a wine press that was circular and it was down inside, and you stepping on it and it goes down and so forth. And how in the world is he going to do the wheat inside of this particular wine press? But he was afraid. He was hiding it from the Midianites because, again, in verse 4, it talks about how they would devour the produce of the land. Are y'all still with me? In verse 12, it says, and the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, the Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. Valor, strength, power. Listen to this. This is a whole lesson in itself, but I'm not going to get on. Well, let's just say this. Whatever God calls you, that's who you are. Whatever God calls you, that is who you are. Because if God's word is truth, whatever he calls you, that's who you are. If we are sons and daughters of the King, that's who we are. See, the thing is, we have a problem in acting in that way, in accepting that. If he says you're loved, you're wonderfully made, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that's who you are. God cannot lie. God will not lie. But it says the Lord is with you. Gideon, the Lord is with you. He's with you. And Gideon said to him, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? Gideon. And where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of the Midianites, or the hand of Midian. If the Lord is with you, why is my life falling apart? If the Lord is with me, angel of the Lord, if he's with me, why is my life falling apart? I'm supposed to be experiencing joy, a lot of all these wealth and success and everything else. Why is my life falling apart? If the Lord is with me. You see, Gideon imposes a basic assumption about God. If my life is all good, then the Lord is with me. But if it's not, then he's not with me. It's a false assumption. Y'all still with me? And the Lord turned to him and said, go in the might of yours and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Do not I send you? And he said to him, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh. Some of your translations may say youngest or whatnot, but it says weakest in Manasseh. And I am the least in my father's house. And the Lord said to him, but I will be with you, and you shall strike the Midianites as one man. I will be with you. And he said to him, if I found favor in your eyes, then show me a sign that it is you who speak with me. In other words, prove it. Prove it. His word wasn't enough. Are y'all following me? If God says he'll do it, he'll do it. If God tells you he will do it, he will do it. Is his word enough? Or do we need other means? Are y'all still with me? goes on and it says, please do not depart from here until I come to you and bring out my present and set it before you. And he said, I will stay till you return. So he's like, look, I'm finna go fix you something. I just want to do this. And please, just stay here. Don't go anywhere. And so Gideon went into his house and prepared a young goat and 11 cakes from an ephah of flour, which is about 30 pounds. That's a lot of flour. The meat he put in a basket, and the broth he put in a pot. And he brought them to him and under the terebinth and presented them. And the angel of God said to him, take the meat and the 11 cakes and put them on this rock. So in other words, whatever you just made, I just want you to put it on the rocks. Put it on the rock and pour the broth over them, and he did so. So you got some soggy meat bread. Then the angel of the Lord reached out the tip of the staff that was in his hand and touched the meat and the unleavened cakes, and fire sprang up from the rock and consumed the meat and the unleavened cakes. And then watch this. And the angel of the Lord vanished from his sight. He gone. He left. I mean, he did this thing and he left. And then Gideon perceived that he was the angel of the Lord. And Gideon said, alas, O Lord God, for now I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. But the Lord said to him, peace be to you. Do not fear. You shall not die. And then Gideon built an altar there to the Lord and called it, the Lord is peace. Yahweh is shalom. And then gets into this latter part here in chapter 6. Gets into Gideon, and he's erecting an altar. He's supposed to go and tear down the altar of Baal and so forth. And he does so, and folks figure it out who did it and want to kill him. And his dad says, no, if you don't do this, if this Baal, if you will, he would contend for himself if he's real, you know. Then it gets into 32, verse 32. It says, therefore, on the day Gideon was called Jerubbaal, that is to say, let Baal or Baal contend against him, because he broke down his altar. Now all the Midianites and all the Amalekites and the people of the east came together, and they crossed the Jordan and encamped in the valley of Jezreel. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon. And he sounded the trumpet, and the Abiezrites were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, and they too were called out to follow him. And he sent messengers to Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, and they went up to meet them. So he has an army. He has an army, Gideon. Verse 36 says, and Gideon said to God, if you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said, behold, I am laying a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. If there is dew on the fleece alone, it is dry on all the ground, then I shall know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you have said. If. And it was so. When he rose early next morning and squeezed the fleece, he wrung enough dew from the fleece to fill a bowl with water. You have your sign. You have an army. You have an army. You collect. Gideon, the weakest, the least of his, the weakest of the tribe, the least in his family, has an army. And he still doubts. He still doubts. In other words, prove it, God. Again. Are y'all still with me? And then he goes on, he says, then Gideon said to God, because it happened. Now, in verse 39, he says to God, let your anger, now don't get mad at me, God, please, don't. Let me speak just once more. Please let me test just once more with the fleece. Please let it be dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground there be dew. And God did so that night, and it was dry on the fleece only, and on all the ground it was dew. Why not trust God's word? Why not trust his word? Sometimes this story is utilized as a discerning of wills. You know, we try to use an example throughout history. People try to use this as an example to discern God's will. And this is not a good thing here. The writer of this, they're criticizing basically Gideon and what he's doing here. We don't use this as an example. God already told him what he was going to do. God already said what he made it clear. It was a promise. He knew what he was going to do. He knows what God is going to do with him. My goodness, he has an army. He has an army. You know, God's grace, he's gracious to us. He would give us things that we want. You know, he would he'd answer our prayers. He would heal us, and he would give us strength. He would give us security. He would do these things because of his grace. Just because of his grace. That's his grace. But just because it is an act of grace, listen to me very carefully. He is not obligated to do that. He said that he will be with us. That's a promise. So when we go through struggles, when we go through pain, when we go through heartache, when we go through things and we're saying, I don't think you're with, no, he's with you. He's with you. Are y'all still with me? Then it gets into verse 2 of chapter 7. The Lord said to Gideon, the people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Gideon has this army. And now the Lord is saying, you got too many people. Too many people. Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead. And guess how many went? 22,000 of them was scared. We gone. And only 10,000 remained. In verse 4, the Lord said to Gideon again, he said, the people are still too many. Can you imagine being Gideon? Like, oh my word, oh Lord. Still too many. Take them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. And anyone of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, shall go with you. And anyone whom I say to you, this one shall not go with you, shall not go with you. So he brought the people down to the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, everyone who kneels down to drink, and everyone who kneels down to drink. In verse 6 it says, and the number of those who lapped, putting their hands to their mouths, was 300 men. But the rest of the people, they had to go. 300 men remain. 300. And I know Gideon is wondering what on earth is going on. 300 men. So the story goes as this, is they end up taking the Midianites. They go and they have their torches and their clay pots and their horns, and they go out there and they do business. In fact, the Midianites, they really don't even touch a hand on the Midianites. The Midianites end up destroying themselves. And so Gideon defeats Midian. defeats Midian. And technically, the Gideon cycle concluded here in chapter 7. The Gideon cycle concluded, but instead of leaving on a high note or a positive one, chapter 8 takes us down a new path. You see, chapter 8 takes us down a new path. As we get into the last days of Gideon's life, we see Gideon's moral and spiritual demise. The book opens with him placating the contentious Ephraimites. One scholar put it this way: Gideon then needlessly pursues the defeated kings and their armies into the Transjordan, and on the way he threatens to punish ruthlessly the Israelites who cautiously refuse to assist him. His threat to the men of Sukkoth, we'll just read it. It says in verse 7 of chapter 8, "So Gideon said, 'Well then, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will flail your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars.'" So his threat to the men of Sukkoth indicates how he confuses the Lord's victory with his own accomplishments. Then upon his successful return, now this is still what this particular scholar has mentioned. He says, then upon his successful return from battle with the enemy kings in his custody, Gideon follows through on his vengeful threats. When he reaches Sukkoth, he claims that they previously taunted him, which just highlights Gideon's narcissistic perspective, and he teaches them a lesson through torture. Then Gideon proceeds to Penuel, where he destroys the tower, as he said, and also gets carried away by impulsively slaughtering the men of the city. After this, Zebah and Zalmunna are forced to acknowledge Gideon's royal status, and Gideon reveals that he is predisposed to be more merciful to the enemy kings than to his fellow Israelites. Unfortunately, these events form the basis of Israel's tragic perception. In this, we see, in chapter 8, we see two things he faced. A worldly or a secular temptation is number one. Worldly or secular temptation. In Judges 8, verse 22, it says, "Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, 'Rule over us, you and your son and your grandson also, for you have saved us from the hand of Midian.'" You see the people's request? The people's request, rule over us. The Israelite people make a huge request. They are so impressed with Gideon that they ask him to rule over them. The usage of this word rule has the idea of dominion. Are y'all still with me? Has the idea of dominion. In other words, they are asking him to be king over them. In fact, not only him just being king, they are offering him and his family a perpetual kingdom or a dynastic kingdom, a dynasty. Rule over us. He says, notice it says, you and your son and your son's sons. You see, the people of Israel was looking for a person that can give them what they wanted, which was peace and security, success and wealth, and how we are doing this in our churches today. What a tragedy. Messing the gospel up. You see, Christ faced this same thing in John 6. Verse 1, it says, "After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "What are we going to do?" No, he didn't say that. He said this. He says, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for enough of them to get a little. And verse 8 says, one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Let us go debo that and take it. No. It says, but what are they for so many? There's so many people here. And Jesus said, have the people sit down. Have them to sit down. Now, there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, gather up the leftover fragments, if you will. Go ahead and gather them up, that nothing may be lost. Leftovers. Yeah. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw, listen to this, when the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, this is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world. Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Jesus feeds a great multitude of people. In fact, scholars believe that it was somewhere between the neighborhood of 20,000 people with, the men's wives and sons and daughters and so forth. And what they saw was a man who could feed them, so they tried to make him their king by force. Now, indeed, he was the king. He is the king. However, he did not wear a crown until the day he went to the cross. Listen, all that the people saw with Gideon is that he defeated the Midianites that oppressed them for 7 years. 7 years. Gideon delivered them, not Yahweh. That's what they saw. He gave them security. They saw that Gideon gave them security and safety. Therefore, their hope was placed in a person. Gideon. How many times do we place our hope in a person? Not understanding that when you place your hope in a person other than the person of Jesus the Christ, the Son of the living God, hope fails. It's not Gideon that led them out. It's not Gideon who defeated the Midianites. It's not Gideon that deserves the praise, the glory, or the crown. It is Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. The one who continues to show himself mighty and above every other Elohim that was served and worshiped not only by the culture but by Israel as well. He is the one. Will you be ruler over us? Will you rule over us? The people's request. And then what we see next is Gideon's refusal. Gideon's refusal. And I put a question mark on purpose. Verse 23 says, Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. This sounds good on the surface. But was it authentic from Gideon's lips? One scholar noted that this statement served as a humble acceptance speech rather than a rejection of their offer. Already, Gideon was functioning as a royal king. He issued his first decree. Gideon had many wives and had 70 biological sons. I still cannot fathom that. But watch this. He named one of his sons Abimelech, which means my father is king. Takes a different turn now, doesn't it? Gideon faced a secular, worldly temptation as the people requested him to be king, and he essentially hypocritically acted in that role. But then Gideon faced a spiritual temptation. That's the second point, a spiritual temptation. Verses 24 through 27 says, and Gideon said to them, let me make a request of you. Every one of you give me the earrings from his spoil, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. Verse 25 says, and they answered, we will willingly give them. And they spread a cloak, and every man threw in it the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple garments worn by the kings of Midian, and besides the collars that were around the necks of their camels. Gideon's request. Gideon requests the people to give him the gold that was from the spoils of war. Now, this gold came out to be more than 57 pounds. In today's currency, that would be over $1 million. That's a lot of gold. But we see the people's response. People do it without hesitation. They do it without hesitation. Gideon takes this gold and make an ephod out of it. An ephod was a garment used in the ministry of the high priest. It was a sleeveless outer vest that came down to the hips. Now, the high priest of Israel wore a linen ephod that had 12 stones on the front, which represented the 12 tribes of Israel. There was a pouch on the front that contained, listen, the Urim and the Thummim, which were stones used to discern the will of God. Y'all following me? It is interesting to me that you see Gideon at the very beginning trying to discern the will of God by putting these fleece out when God already told him that he was going to do what he was going to do. But now he's making an ephod that will later be worshiped. It's as if he put his hope in those things instead of God's word. Are y'all still with me? So Gideon made an ephod, a high priest prayer garment from gold, and then he took his ephod and placed it in Ophrah. Verse 27 says, and all Israel whored after it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and to his family. This verb whored, played the harlot, in some of your translations, is an extremely graphic depiction of Israel's covenant unfaithfulness to her divine husband. Some translations may mislead readers a bit by translating this phrase prostituting themselves by worshiping it. Here in this context, all of Israel is unfaithful, as one scholar noted, not because of worshiping other gods directly, but because of the syncretism of presuming that Yahweh can be manipulated through the ephod. In the same way as other gods, the ephod is thus not itself an object of worship. It is rather a means of abandonment. Hope. What are you placing your hope in today?